great, Frank. Anyway, tonight, driving here to the end, cop stopped me and gave me a ticket. I looked at him and I said, what am I supposed to do with this? He said, well, when you get 4, you get a bicycle. I remember the first time, the last time I went to court to pay for a summons, and I got there at 9 in the morning and I was sitting around until 1 o'clock. They still hadn't called me, and suddenly the judge bangs his gavel and says, court adjourned, come back tomorrow. I jumped up and yelled, what for? He looked at me and he said, you are out of order and I'm going to fine you $20 for those 2 words. So I put my hand in my pocket and he says, oh, you don't have to pay today, you can come back tomorrow. I said, no, Your Honor, I'm just checking to see if I got enough money for 2 more words. You know, this is my 3rd year up here, and as a speaker, I said to Jean, why do you keep having me back here? And she says, well, Arnold, you've been really a very generous contributor, and the money you give us goes into a special fund. I said, no kidding, what is a special fund for? She said, well, we're accumulating money so we can afford a better speaker. I said, Jean, you gotta be careful, Jean. I said, you know, I know a lot of people who got fooled when, trying to get better speakers. I know one guy, he went and bought a parrot for $1,000 that could speak 7 languages. And he told the pet store, deliver it to my mother. He says, it's Mother's Day, I wanted to have it. He came home that night. He says, hey, Mom, what'd you think of the bird? She said it was delicious. Mom, that bird cost me $1,000. It could speak 7 languages. She says, so why didn't it speak up and say something? You know, and Gene, and there was a guy selling dictaphones, trying to sell a dictaphone to a Jewish businessman. And he said, listen, if you speak into this dictaphone, it'll speak back to you and it'll help your business. Why don't you try it out for a day? I'll come back tomorrow. You tell me if you like it. He came back the next day. He says, well, what do you think of the dictaphone? The old Jewish businessman says, it's not bad, but talks with a terrible accent. And now I've got another story for you. I'm trying to remember just what it was. Lately, I'm what I call a psychic amnesiac. I can predict what I'm going to forget. Yes, this is a very interesting story about a young man who was on vacation in Europe when he hears that his grandfather had died, and he comes running home, but he gets there too late to speak at the funeral. And he becomes so depressed that he gets involved with a bunch of psychics who tell him that for a sizable sum, they can create a seance where he can eventually communicate with his grandpa. So he agrees to it. He says, all right. And they sit around the table one night, and the lights are flickering, and they're holding hands, and they're humming, and they're swaying, and they're calling out, Grandpa Max, speak to us. And suddenly there's a moan from the ceiling, and they say, this is Grandpa Max, who's looking for me? He says, oh boy, jumps up, he says, Grandpa, that's me, it's your son Sheldon. Grandpa, it's your grandson Sheldon. I came to the funeral too late and I couldn't speak and tell how much I miss you and love you. He says, oh, Grandpa says, I always knew that, my boy. He said, but I just want you to know I'm very happy up here. I have lots of new friends, and right now I'm very busy and I can't continue, but it's wonderful that you called me. And the young man says, Grandpa, before you go, I just want to ask you one question. He says, what is it, my boy? He says, Grandpa, when did you learn to speak English? You know, whenever I come in here, I'm always amazed at what a marvelous and wonderful job the inn does, and I see how they've grown each year. I mean, I see that right now they have probably 19 locations, and they supervise literally thousands of guests and volunteers. And it sort of reminds me of a situation where a farmer buys a vacant, dry piece of land, and after many years, he develops the most successful and lucrative farm in his whole county. And one day the local preacher comes by, looks at him and says, you know, he says, I can see where you and the Lord have really prospered. And the farmer said, well, that's true. He said, but you should have seen what this place looked like when the Lord had it all by himself. Well, anyway, in closing for my speaking engagement, I would like to, in order to honor Frank and his family, I decided that I'd like to repeat a story that I gave to the inn 2 years ago. And it's a story because it's a story I like because it actually demonstrates the timeliness of their contribution. It's a story of a fairy tale conversation that takes place between a pig and a cow. And the pig says to the cow, why is it everyone loves you more than they love me? After all, you only give milk, while I give ham, bacon, pork, pigskin, while they even make brushes out of my bristles. And the cow says, well, maybe they love me more than they love you because I give while I'm still alive. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the essence of the motto of the inn. Be a cow and give now. It's a wonderful audience. Thank you.